Something's off in this country, and you can feel it. The tension, the mistrust, the quiet distance between people who used to talk openly. Family, friends, neighbors. Now everyone's on edge, watching what they say or not talking at all. It's not just political anymore, it's personal, it's tribal. People aren't debating policies, they're choosing sides. Beliefs have become battle lines, and nobody's crossing them. We're not living in one America anymore. We're watching two Americas drift apart. Two different realities, different facts, different fears, red against blue, cities against rural towns, religion against progress. Nobody's budging, and now secession is back on the table. Some states are openly talking about breaking away. Some people say civil war is coming. Others aren't just saying it, they're preparing for it. Stockpiling weapons, building networks, training. This isn't just polarization. It's collapse in slow motion. And here's the thing, it might not look like it did the first time. This time it won't be state against state. It could be street by street, block by block. So maybe it's time to stop acting like this is all going to just blow over, because we need to ask the question that's been sitting just under the surface.
2023, a Pew Research Center study found that Democrats and Republicans are further apart ideologically than at any point in the last 50 years. It's not just policy disagreements, it's worldviews. Each side sees the other as a fundamental threat to the country's future. According to polling from the Public Religion Research Institute, over 70% of Republicans believe the 2020 election was stolen. On the other side, a majority of Democrats believe the Republican Party is actively working to dismantle democracy. These aren't fringe beliefs, these are mainstream, everyday voters. This level of distrust plays out everywhere, from online platforms to Congress itself. In 2022, lawmakers failed to pass a bipartisan commission to investigate the Capitol riot. Not because the facts weren't there, but because both sides couldn't even agree on what reality was. And this goes deeper than politics. It shows up in science, religion, race, gender, even basic public health. During the pandemic, mask mandates and vaccines became political symbols, not medical tools, political identities. That's when it became clear. This isn't just a divided country. It's two countries trying to exist in the same space. A 2022 Gallup poll revealed that confidence in major U.S. institutions, Congress, the media, the presidency, had hit record lows. For many Americans, there's no longer a shared truth, just opposing narratives. This is the kind of ideological fracture that historically leads to unrest. In most democracies, when people stop trusting the system, one of two things happens. Either the system reforms, or it breaks. Belong to extremists and cranks. Now it's part of mainstream political conversation. In 2021, a Brightline Watch survey, a respected political science project, found that 37% of Americans in the South supported breaking away from the U.S. and forming their own country. That number jumped to 66% among Republicans in the same region. Texas Republicans even included a secession clause, commonly referred to as Texit, in their 2022 party platform. It calls for a referendum that would let Texans vote on leaving the United States. That's not a joke. That's official party policy. California has its own version, CalExit. First floated seriously after Trump's 2016 win, it's gained traction among progressive circles that believe the federal government no longer represents their values. Meanwhile, rural counties in Oregon are actively campaigning to join Idaho, citing cultural and political alignment. In theory, none of this is legal under U.S. constitutional law. The 1869 Supreme Court case Texas v. White made it clear, states can't secede on their own, but legality hasn't stopped people from trying. And in a country this fractured, the law doesn't always keep up with the mood. What's more concerning is that some political leaders are entertaining the idea, not just citizens. In states like Florida, Mississippi, and South Carolina, legislators have made public statements that America is becoming ungovernable. They frame secession as a last resort, a necessary escape from federal overreach. Historically, these conversations are warning signs. You don't get serious talk about breaking up the country unless people have lost faith in the idea of it working together. And once that idea dies, the structure isn't far behind. They're organizing, arming themselves, getting ready for something they believe is coming. And that's where things get dangerous. Since around 2008, there's been a steady rise in anti-government and militia groups across the U.S. according to the Southern Poverty Law Center. There were over 500 active anti-government groups operating in the country as of 2022. Many of them are armed. Many of them are preparing for a fight. Groups like the Oath Keepers, the Boogaloo Boys, and the 3%ers aren't just internet trolls with guns. These are people with training, strategy, and in some cases, military backgrounds. The Oath Keepers, for example, had members convicted for their role in the January 6th Capitol attack. That wasn't spontaneous rage, that was a planned operation. Some of these groups believe a second civil war is inevitable. Not just possible, inevitable. They see themselves as the last line of defense against a corrupt government or a cultural takeover, depending on who you ask. Others see it as a race war or a religious war. The ideologies vary, but the core belief is the same. America as it stands is broken beyond repair. On the flip side, you also have left-wing groups, like Antifa-aligned collectives, who've shown up to counter right-wing demonstrations, sometimes with their own violence. While not as organized or heavily armed, they add to the chaos. It's not one-sided. There's an edge building on both extremes, and what's worse, law enforcement is often caught in the middle. The FBI has repeatedly warned about the rising threat of domestic terrorism, especially from white supremacist and militia groups. But in some local areas, these same militias have ties to sheriffs or community leaders. It's messy, and it's already past the point of being dismissed as fringe. This isn't a hypothetical anymore. These groups are growing, training, recruiting, and waiting. People hear Civil War, they picture blue and gray uniforms, battle lines, Gettysburg. That's not how it would look today. If something breaks out now, it's going to be much more scattered, much harder to define, and harder to stop. Experts have warned that if civil conflict happens, it won't be state versus state. It'll be decentralized. Think small, localized violence, armed standoffs, government buildings attacked, power grids sabotaged, militias clashing with law enforcement, possibly even rogue actors inside the system. Barbara F. Walter, a political scientist and author of How Civil Wars Start, describes it like this. It begins when democratic institutions weaken, people lose faith in the system, and then political factions start to form outside of it, often with weapons. It doesn't explode all at once, it creeps. You might already be seeing the early signs. Armed protests at state capitals, election officials receiving death threats, local governments getting infiltrated by extremists. These aren't isolated events, they're part of a larger pattern. And here's the really unsettling part. Most Americans wouldn't even see it coming. It wouldn't be a declaration of war, it would just start happening. A school board meeting turns violent, a governor's mansion gets surrounded, a federal agent disappears. It would feel like random chaos, until you realize it's not random at all. The government might try to intervene, but in a country with over 400 million guns in civilian hands, controlling that kind of unrest would be almost impossible. And the military? They're trained for foreign wars, not domestic ones. Plus, who commands them if the political leadership is part of the conflict? It's not dramatic to ask these questions anymore. It's realistic. America right now, this erosion of trust, the polarization, the slow drip of violence, it's not new. Other countries have gone through it, and most of them didn't see the collapse coming until it was already happening. Take Yugoslavia in the 1990s, a modern, multi-ethnic country, developed cities, educated population. Then things started to splinter. Ethnic tensions, political manipulation, economic strain. Within a few years it was full-blown civil war. Neighbor turned against neighbor, not in the middle of nowhere, in city blocks and apartment buildings. Then there's Chile in the 1970s, a democratic country with strong institutions. Until the left and right started viewing each other as existential threats. The military staged a coup. Democracy didn't just bend, it snapped. Rwanda, Venezuela, Lebanon, the patterns vary, but the warning signs are surprisingly consistent. When the middle collapses, when both sides stop believing the system works for them, people start looking for more extreme answers. And once violence becomes part of the political conversation, it doesn't leave quietly. Researchers have even built models to track this. One of them, the Political Instability Task Force, originally funded by the US government, found that the most reliable predictor of civil conflict isn't poverty or ethnicity or even political ideology. It's when a country's ruling class becomes so locked in power that the rest of the population feels shut out completely. Sound familiar? In other words, countries don't fall apart because people want war. They fall apart because enough people stop seeing another way. And the worst part, when collapse happens, it often feels slow until it doesn't. One day you're arguing about tax policy. The next, someone setting fire to a polling station. The cracks are real, but they're not irreversible. Not yet. Yes, America is deeply divided, but most Americans still want the same basic things: stability, safety, a future for their kids. The problem isn't that people disagree. The problem is that there's no longer a shared space to work it out. So how do you fix that? Some say it starts with restoring trust in the system. That means actual accountability, real consequences for corruption, misinformation, abuse of power. Whether it's in government, law enforcement, or the media, people need to see that rules apply to everyone. Otherwise, the idea of justice becomes meaningless. Others argue it has to happen at a local level first. Community-based solutions, small, real-world wins. Talking to your neighbors instead of shouting at strangers online. There are programs, quiet, underfunded but working, that bring together people from opposite ends of the spectrum for dialogue, not debate, just conversation. And it turns out that still works when you remove the cameras and the algorithms. And then there's reform. Big picture change, redistricting, election integrity, media transparency. None of it's flashy, but all of it matters. Because when people think their vote doesn't count, or that media is just propaganda, or that politicians answer only to donors, they disengage. And disengagement is what allows extremism to thrive. It's also about recognizing what's real and what's noise. The internet rewards the loudest, angriest voices. But most Americans don't want a civil war. They want a functioning country. The problem is that the extreme few often hijack the narrative and the rest of us let them. So is it too late? No, but the clock's ticking. And if something's going to change, it's not going to come from a tweet or a slogan or a viral video. It's going to come from a decision to step back from the edge, or to keep charging forward into whatever's waiting on the other side. All of this. Maybe the biggest one that nobody wants to talk about directly. The system profits from division. Cable news doesn't make money when things are calm. Social media platforms don't grow by promoting reasonable, nuanced conversation. Outrage gets clicks. Fear keeps people tuned in. Division is good for business. A 2021 internal study from Facebook leaked to the press admitted that the company's own algorithm amplified divisive content and political extremism. Why? Because that's what keeps people scrolling. YouTube's recommendation engine has been found to push viewers toward increasingly extreme political videos within just a few hours of casual browsing. The more time you spend being outraged, the more ads they can sell. The scary part? This isn't some secret conspiracy, it's just the way the systems are built, to reward engagement over everything else, and rage engages. Every time we react to something we hate online, we make that content more visible. And the cycle keeps spinning. Add AI into the mix, and now we've entered a whole new phase. Fake audio clips, deep fake videos, entire news sites powered by bots. It's already getting hard to tell what's real. In a few years, it may be impossible. And in that environment, how do you hold a democracy together? How do you vote, organize, or even think clearly when reality itself can be manufactured? This is how civil conflict starts now, not with cannon fire, but with chaos, confusion, doubt. If you don't know who to trust or what's true, you're easier to control, easier to radicalize, easier to turn against someone. That's the battlefield now, not just on the streets, but in your phone, in your mind. The United States isn't on fire right now, but the heat is rising. And if you look closely, the warning signs aren't subtle, they're loud. Angry mobs storming government buildings, states talking about leaving the Union, political leaders refusing to accept election results, armed groups preparing for war they say is inevitable. Some people are already treating civil war like it's just part of the future, something they can plan around, something they want. But most of us, we just want to live, work, raise our kids, trust that the system, flawed as it is, can still hold. And right now, it's holding, barely. The good news, civil war isn't destiny, it's a choice, and so is peace. But the longer we ignore the cracks, the harder it'll be to fix them. The longer we let lies replace facts, and hate replace trust, the more likely this country becomes something unrecognizable. This isn't a warning from some outsider looking in. This is home. This is us. And if we don't figure out how to pull back, how to talk, how to listen, how to rebuild what's already been lost, we may not get a second chance. Because the second Civil War might not come with a bang, it might come in pieces, quietly, until it's already here.